So get this. My stepmother is like obsessed with her last name, right? Because she married my father, and now she can just say, "Oh, I'm such royalty. My blood goes so far back to the royal heirs." Well, guess what, Eleanor? I know something you don't know.
The history of my family, or rather of my family tree, is somewhat complicated. I'll start from the beginning. My father had a daughter with my mother, and then they got divorced. The bitter part, my mother passed away when I was still a child, so I had to live with my dad, who soon after married a woman who was not the perfect definition of nice or even good. She's one of those snobbish women who keeps bragging about her lineage and family. She belongs to a rather swanky family in the country, based in the capital but with properties in almost every state. She's the only one who has stayed in the city since she was young and has had a life of luxury, but with Dad, she feels like she hit the jackpot. Dad is a good, hardworking man who has managed to have certain advantages thanks to the business network he had when my grandparents passed away. It's been a life full of great coincidences, because when he inherited those businesses, that woman Eleanor took him like a bee to honey. Of course, I won't deny that there was some affection involved, but I really think she did it more to maintain her status as a rich, powerful family. She reminds me of those shows on the entertainment channels where they see the lives of the rich and famous and somehow people find that interesting. She's very mean to those people who don't have an outlandish last name, and it's funny because as soon as she just hears a last name from Europe, she already thinks that that person comes from a good cradle. Well, once we were incredibly embarrassed because we went to a hiking trail and we met some guys, blonde, blue-eyed, tall, and with the last name Bastion, saying they come from Switzerland. She was so fascinated by them, even saying that she remembered meeting a family with that same name in Europe on her way to many trips as a child. However, when we drove to the nearest hut on the road and ended up sharing a coffee, gosh, I'm so embarrassed to even remember it. She changed her face when she saw that the men bought the small coffee because, quote, they didn't have enough money. She associated surnames with wealth, and that's too extreme of a level of classism. Now ask me, if we had any contact with the Bastion brothers since then, I think I get to tell the anecdote again to Eleanor, and she'll pretend it never happened or that maybe I'm telling lies, because to turn on my father is too good. Truth be told, my living with her has not been the best since I've known her. You see, my mother was Latina, so I retain very strong traits of my Peruvian heritage, but she doesn't like it. After all, she's the kind of American who can't see someone who claims to come from Latin America because all at once she associates it with being Mexican. Cough, 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 racist. Anyways, she's always just looked down on me, like she's 10 steps above me or anyone else. She treats the workers in the house like slaves and only hangs out with people who are well within the circle of wealthy people in town. Translation, pure plastic ladies who have more silicone than neurons, and there's one whose face no longer looks anything like it did when she was young because of so many surgeries, but they all envy her for that. Anyways, my father does not intervene so much in that kind of thing since she's quite jealous of her status, and to a certain extent, she has left us apart because of that. But more so for me, I think the worst memory I have of my childhood were the times when she had to pick me up from school. Gosh, what an embarrassment she was, because she forgets my face. I simply just had to ask her which of the boys in the classroom she was, and she would say, "The little girl with brown skin and slanted eyes, Asian type." Now, as an adult, I feel that this has reached levels of carelessness and racism that were difficult to process, even for that time. Anyways, she always prepares annual events with the people closest to her, investing some of her family members to an evening where all they do is brag about their status. I know I use the word status a lot, but believe me, it's not a small thing, because out of 10 conversations, at least 7 or 8 are about it. Last year, the theme of the evening was family traditions, which was researched, and it was discovered that trillions of years ago her ancestors made some drink with fermented onion, ginger, and other things that ended up creating some syrup that smelled horrible and tasted worse. The funny thing about it is that Eleanor loved said syrup. while some of her family members had a pretty hard time trying to get through, the drink. She would almost down a whole pitcher of the disgusting liquid on her own, and all while still maintaining that nasty, I'm superior to you smile. That's the kind of thing that annoys me about her, that she can stop bragging about her snobbery to anyone who walks by her, whether they know her or not. I've even learned that some of her friends don't even pass her by, coming across as extremely vain even to people of that stature. When you live with a person like that for a long time, you think you can just get used to it, but hey, it's not like that. What's more, when I was little, I used to find a way to stay the night outside the house, either at a friend's or even a classmate's under the excuse that we had to do a project, and all because I didn't want to spend time with that woman. On any outing, trip, or even at meals, she had to impose your family values to the point where even at parties, she used to pull out one of the most Karen with money phrases of all time, and not in a sarcastic way, and I quote you this: "You don't know who I am, do you?" As if anyone gives a flying duck who you are, Eleanor. I'm writing all this because even though it's still 2 months away, she's already planning her family's next theme party, which she says she wants to make into the biggest one yet. Don't ask me, but she seems very excited. She keeps talking on the phone with her other family members, but she has barely spoken to my dad, let alone me. That's kind of weird. Well, not on my side, because usually she at least keeps my dad in the loop, even if it's just for financial reasons, which translates to asking him for more money. But this year, everything is a complete secret. At this point, I'm even curious about what she's planning and if it involves us. Although not entirely. I wonder if we'll be invited in the celebration. Mind you, if the celebration involves some other weird family tradition like, I don't know, stuffing rabbits, then no thanks. I'd rather stay in my room doing literally anything. Updates. Number 1. A family tree. Something we do in elementary school that's going to be the theme of Eleanor's next family reunion. Mind you, since she's she and can't do something relatively normal, she wanted to take this reunion to the extreme, doing some sort of biological research or something, using the blood of all the family members she saw on one of these millions of TV shows about agencies and companies that take DNA samples and end up making a genealogical line regarding races, regions, or ancestry you may have had in the past. Many work this way, with some requiring only hair or saliva samples, but Eleanor decides to go further, asking for blood samples from all members, including children. I came to think of this activity as a somewhat horrible form of discrimination, but those in her family who mixed with other races and ethnicities, they're few, of course, but still, it's not nice to have your family exclude you from their things just because you decided to be with the person that they love the most. They treat some of the cousins indifferently just because they get involved with someone else, even though up to that moment they still shared the same blood. Anyways, a few are nieces, nephews, and grandchildren who are loved by all the members of the family, like me, for example. Although I'm the only case of stepdaughter there is, sometimes I think it was really weird that Eleanor wanted to be with my dad after that whole family thing. I would think I was breaking her lineage. Sure, she also talked about having a child between the two of them so they can perpetrate the blood and everything, but if that baby's going to be raised inside that bubble of false privilege, better not. Sometimes I talk to my dad about it and he tells me that it's a real concern he has, but he still loves Eleanor and all the good virtues that he sees in her that I simply don't. She's still of age to consider children. But for me, I'd rather stay an only child, although knowing that woman, she'll surely want a little lamb to be heir. God, if one Eleanor's bad, can you imagine two? The only thing I could think that could go wrong is if it were a female. If we go to the outside views, Eleanor treats her family like the old monarchy, where they could not mix with the townspeople or slaves, developing some sort of pure race. And in those cases, the women sought sons, because they wanted to keep the family name no matter what, without thinking that today there's families that decide to keep the mother's name for their children, as two of my friends. Anyways, I'm waiting to see how this new reunion will be, since Eleanor is always looking for a way to make these celebrations a parade of exclusion. Update number 2. I had a very strong argument with Eleanor, the worst I've ever had in my life with anyone, but it's because she started it. You see, I'm working in a party and banquet food stand, and precisely, Eleanor decides to ask for our services, which we were delighted to accept as we knew that she and her friends were going to be asking for the highest package. At their parties, they always ask for things like fine grills, cheeses, and wine, and we saw this as a golden opportunity to get a month's payment in one order. So, I arranged with my boss and we set everything up and organized the evening with a 50% down payment. Now, something you have to understand about the catering company is that we always ask about the quality of our service to know if everything's going well, even in the middle of the evening. So in case something happens, an eventuality or something, we can be prepared. It's something that's always been done, and that's distinguished our services from others, and when I did that, it was my turn to tell Eleanor if everything was in order and if anything else was offered. She simply said that everything was fine and that they were in ecstasy. And the truth that I believed her, for they were all laughing loudly by the pool until late into the night, while we had to stay there to indulge in whatever whim they had. The thing is, 2 whole days went by and the other half of the payment had not been completed. I didn't say anything because I thought Eleanor at any moment would, however. That time passed and I thought that she had forgotten. I gave her a little reminder while she was working on her laptop, and she seemed somewhat offended and said, "Sorry, honey, payment for what?" I told her it's payment for the other half of the banquet given to her and her friends, but she said she thought I paid for the rest. If you guys are confused, I was even more confused, so I told her I did not quite understand what she was saying, and she told me. She thought that I had gifted her the rest of the evening. Readers, at no time in my existence, I swear, have I ever spoken to that woman about such, and it just doesn't cross my mind that someone would just like that give away something that's more than half of the monthly payment. I explained to her that it did not happen that way and that she had to pay the rest. She started spouting off about her family and how they could not be denied anything, and I was like, "Are you serious? Are you seriously saying those words?" That's the most absurd and stupid thing I've ever heard in my life. She took it the wrong way and sent for one of the housekeepers to get my dad, and I told her why didn't she just go get him herself, or even send him a message on the phone, and from there everything went straight to the war field. I started calling her lazy, self-centered, but she told me that the only thing that I was jealous of was her beauty, fortune, and blood. Blood? Me? Jealous of blood? That's when I burst out laughing until I almost fell to the ground. I told her that she was behaving exactly like those idiot influencers who think that just because they have followers, they already deserve to have everything on a silver platter. And life is not like that. Let me tell you, I don't know what happened to me, but it's what it is, as a jar of pickles had been released inside me, spilling out insults that I accumulated for years. My dad had to actually intervene, because Eleanor, despite everything, is pretty fierce, and she can eat you alive in one sitting with all the screaming and violent body language. When my dad managed to separate us, the housekeepers came to my side in another room, congratulating me for standing up to the devil. I can't imagine what it must be like for them to put up with that stupid talk of royalty and royalty and royalty. It's already reached a very exaggerated level, even though it's been going on for years. In the end, something happened that I did not want. My dad ended up paying for the rest of the meal, and it was a bit ugly, because thanks to this little scene, Eleanor canceled the next job that was going to be done at her family reunion, something that did not please my boss. I almost lost my job because of her, and now my boss, with whom I always had a good relationship with, since even before my first day, is on my case saying that we could have lost one of the best jobs of the year because of the cancellation. So I talked to my dad, but it didn't do much good, since he's very defensive of old Eleanor, and said he had no problem paying the remaining bill, but I told him that wasn't the idea, and that she needs to get rid of these trashy ideologies about being better than everyone just because she has a certain last name. I mean, come on. She even went so far as to treat me badly just for being a mixed race. And I told her that it was a good thing that she wasn't a Nazi, because if she had found out that my dad had been with a woman of another race, she would have cut off his, well, you get the point. My dad did not like the comment very much, so I ended up in my room. And since then, I've been writing all this for you guys, but I'm posting it now after a mini revisions, because I just realized that I insulted Eleanor a lot while writing this. Anyways, this is just one more update to tell you how miserable my life is right now. Update number 3. I'm writing this from the home of one of my aunts, as the situation in my house is tense after everything that happened. Eleanor's family reunion finally happened. The relatives arrived, and I had the honor, the privilege, the gift, according to her, of going to get the results of the blood samples of the family tree. Do you guys know that meme that's like white people things? Well, this meeting was something like that. A bunch of snobby people laughing while covering their mouth and thinking that I was part of the table service, even though they had only seen me a couple years ago. Eleanor appeared with a large sheet, placing the names of the participants on paper circled with Velcro, with markers to make the lines. It would be very bland family tree, since the most bizarre thing that happened in that family's marriage was the divorce of Aunt and Eleanor's marriage to my dad. A divorced man. Otherwise, everyone was still married with at most 2 children and so on. Eleanor's parents were in Asia, so they were unable to attend, and that was something I would have liked to have seen in case everything had turned out as it did. I had an ugly encounter with her that day because things were still tense between her and me after what happened at her sorry. If you want more info, well, don't skip the last update. And she held me in a very low esteem to the point of sending me to get the test results because then I would not be present for the celebration. Also, I feel that this event has a darker purpose, which was to banish me from the family, or at least from her side of the family. I say this because among the names on the referral brand board, neither mine nor my mother appeared, and it just had my father in another color next to her, and that was it. When I gave her the results, she simply took them from my hand without even saying thank you. I took that badly, very badly, and watched as she headed to the side of the pool while everyone else was still at their tables eating and drinking. As always, she likes to be the center of attention. Everything became much more ceremonial than it should have been, and we ended up with my dad and me just straggling in a corner, talking to each other. I told him that I thought the whole thing was absolutely ridiculous, and while he thought so a little too, he said that at least we were able to help someone else be happy, and sometimes my dad is very marshmallowy. Anyways, things start pretty strong when Eleanor takes the microphone and begins to speak, thanking everybody for attending the annual family event, the biggest one to date. Since now other guests were also in attendance, we were just friends in that family, wealthy, influential people in town. Many would dream of being at an event like this, but all I wanted was to be able to lie down in my own bed to sleep for about 20 hours straight in peace. I say it started strong because Eleanor made an announcement, which left us speechless. For this event, we can start with me, who has something to reveal. In a few months, we'll be expecting a new member of the family into the world. My dad and I looked at each other and we were absolutely speechless. That's right, honey, I'm pregnant. At least we'll have our child. When I heard that, I felt a strong urge to strangle her because it seemed as if I did not exist, and she never considered me as her daughter. I understood what she was saying, but still it wasn't pretty. The applause was not long in coming, and my dad went to kiss and hug her. I stayed in my place, and no one seemed to really mind. The only thing was that my dad patted me on the shoulder when it was all over and said, You're going to have a new baby brother or sister. Guys, I dare you to guess my excited face. Then it was time for closure, right? She started with some older relatives, the first on the list, and first she talked about the ethnic backgrounds of each, saying that they belonged even at one time to a rather powerful family from Ireland and England. There was a lot of rather surprising facts of which even I was impressed, but when she got to the part about her ancestry, well, it went all wrong. She would at the beginning of each one say the referential, 50% English, 32% Arab, and 8% German, and so on, and then reveals some relevant percentages. There was one of her cousins who was related to a famous sheik from India, apparently, but when it was her turn, her smile changed radically. She just said, "And now let's put my baby right under me and see my results." She was speechless and started frowning. She made a lot of strange faces as she read to herself, and then she looked at me and said, "Did you go get the results where I told you to get them from?" Saying that it was a scolding, or like she was talking to a fool. I nodded my head, and she kept on reading. No one said anything, and an awkward silence began that became even more awkward than she made a face. "These results are fake!" Eleanor was saying at the top of her lungs without a microphone as she threw it on the floor and ran away crying as if she were nothing more than a spoiled child. My dad went to her and aid, and while another, her cousin, took the paper and read it to the table it was on. Eleanor came out quite different on her test. Her predominant ethnicity, it seems, was Mexican, and she came from native immigrants from Mexico, with only 2% European. What's more, she wasn't even attached to the family as such, because later, when she finally left the house, she went to tell her parents via video call to explain everything. Are you guys ready for this? It turns out she was adopted. Look, if there's a God in this world, he manifested himself that night to give me and many others, it seems, the most satisfying moment of our entire existence. There were a few cousins who laughed out loud, but the rest weren't so happy. The guests, upon learning of this, gradually left, leaving the house empty with only a couple of aunts at the end. I don't think Eleanor ever cried so much in her little life, and she yelled, insulting her parents to the top of her lungs. Anyways, to sum it all up, it ended in chaos, where Miss Fancy Lineage ended up realizing that she did not belong to the family she boasted of so much over the years. Look, it's already late. I'll tell you everything later. I'm going to sleep, and I feel that since that night, I have had better sleep. Update number 4. Final update of the story. Hey guys, I'm writing now as much as I can since I've been in a new job and the schedule has me quite complicated. Besides, I'll soon start college and I don't know if I can keep up with this hobby. Even so, I'll tell you how it ended and, well, it went with Eleanor. It wasn't very easy, let's say. She entered a pretty dark period in her life where she was disowned by her own family after what happened at the party. It's funny and sad how everyone can turn their backs on you in a heartbeat just because of something like that. I know I didn't act right either, but I feel like the way her family treated her is just a reflection of how she treated society in general. Let's say she got a spoonful of her own medicine. Either that, or even her family members were simply tired of her, which I completely understand. I quit the catering job after that. Just as an alternate note, I could get something much better. Although, I did not last long, because after several recommendations I ended up here. But before I move on to me, let's go back with Eleanor's story since, as I said, it's kinda murky. The pregnancy only made her much worse, as her emotions were running wild. It was one of the worst periods to have her around because my dad was confessing to me that he wanted to ask her for a divorce, and she was much aware of it. But he could not just abandon her like that. He wanted to wait until the baby was born to start the preparations, but Eleanor went ahead. That's right. She prevailed on my father and said she didn't need his decency to get ahead, so she left. She disappeared, ghosted, and it was about 2 weeks when we were looking for her, but nobody knew where she went. Then we found out that a couple of friends knew, and although they told us that she was relatively okay, the truth is that she did not want anyone to bother her. She was still working at her remote job, only now in a studio apartment which only had one room with a kitchen next door. When we went to visit her, well, her condition wasn't the best. I don't want to go into too many details because they are not so pleasant even for me, but let's just say that she got her well-deserved justice. We were by her side already for the last stages of the pregnancy process, even though she wanted nothing to do with us. So, not much of pity, but because she still had this twisted mentality of being better than us, as if it was a microchip that we fused in her brain and altered her personality forever. The baby was born healthy. A baby girl. Who knew? We were somewhat saddened that Eleanor wasn't thrilled when she found out it was a girl, for, as I say, she still had this strange idea of blood superiority, but at least she tried to be a good mother to the little one. However, this did not go quite right. My dad and I kept a sharp eye on Eleanor and the baby, and we ended up believing that she was not the right one to raise her. There were some behind-the-scenes arguments between my dad and her. Until the end, they could not come to an agreement and started the custody trial. In the end, the dispute did not last long, since the same time of the divorce it was concluded that Eleanor was not in economic or mental standings to take care of the child, so she would stay with us. I'm not going to deny that the situation hurts me because we're separating a mother from her daughter, but it's either that or risk the baby going through something major. No, I don't even want to imagine the scenario. Just doing it gives me absolute chills. And that's how we ended up with a baby in the house. The housekeepers help us a lot with the little one, and although Eleanor has the opportunity to visit her on the weekends, it's been about 4 weeks since she's shown up at the house again. In the end, being that I'm the one who will end up raising that little girl, whatever, because I'll raise her the best of my ability and show her the great wonder of her family tree and how far we've come because of it. Or, well, it's not like my family are kings or anything, but at least we're bound together by something greater than blood, which Eleanor can never understand.
So, I am not against DNA testing to find your lineage, your heritage, diseases that you could possibly have later on in life. I think it's a good thing. But when you get so obsessed with it like Eleanor did in today's story, I think it starts negatively affecting your mental space. And I think that's what we saw in today's story with Eleanor. But I do want to know your thoughts on it, guys. Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think Eleanor was completely ridiculous? I want to know what you would have done if you were in OP's position. So guys, go ahead, drop a comment downstairs. Let's discuss this one and let me know. Have you ever taken a DNA test? I have done, 21andMe or something similar to that. I forgot the name. So I have taken one, and it is interesting to know your heritage and your family and how far it goes back. But I just think what Eleanor did was borderline a mental problem. But I do want to know your thoughts, guys, so drop it down below. Let's talk about it. My name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate stories every single day. So if you want to be a part of these daily readings, the best way is just simply pressing that subscribe button. That way you support the channel and you never miss a video. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and of course, just remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.